Sweats drool down on his face, being surprised with the sheer number of the undead mastodon charging towards Lloyd's way. Assessing the situation, Lloyd screams. He instructs each and every one of his workers to get away as fast as possible. The soldiers are frantically running as Lloyd follows them from behind, trying to make sure that no one gets left behind, only to be surprised by the white cavalry, as Velarde commands his men to prepare that this is their last day, implying that they will welcome the herd of the undead. He sings praises for the sake of Her Majesty the Queen and the Frontier County as Lloyd screams at Velarde, telling him to not do whatever he plans to do, only for Velarde to command his man to run away with Lloyd's and his worker. And together they run away from the undead mastodons, while Lloyd is trying to rack his brain to see if there is a way to deal with them in the terrain they are currently in. An idea comes to mind, trying to use the baby mastodons in Frontier County, so he screams at the top of his lungs, telling Podong to slow them down. Without wasting any time, Podong comes sweeping in with his massive size to welcome the herd. He uses a punch he called Podong Blow to send the mastodon flying and smash into the herd behind it. He uses another technique called Podong Elbow to smack one of it into the ground, and another called Podong Home Run Kick to send a few mastodon flying. As the others come closing in on him, he nimbly steps back, then prepares more of his technique. Plum Blossom Rampant Dance, a technique that looks like a karate movement, sending a bunch of mastodon flying. Looking from behind, Lloyd is petrified with the thoughts of what Podong might be watching to use technique like that. But one after another, the mastodons keep charging toward the pure and adorable hamster. That instead makes him agitated, so he throws them into the air. Yet, the sheer number of the herd is proving hard to be handled by Podong alone for them to keep coming at him. Slowly yet surely, Podong starts to get buried with the swarm of the undead. Comes at the right moment, Lloyd screams a bunch of insults towards the herd. A moment of silence arises, as the herds turn their gaze toward the sole standing man, Lloyd, with a baby mastodon by his side, as he expresses that he has it. He raises his shovel towards its neck, as he threatens that it will be just a lump of meat in 5 seconds while licking its head with his disturbing expression. Anger starts to boil on the herd's eyes, looking at Lloyd, who keeps provoking them while the adorable baby mastodon is trembling in fear of what Lloyd might do to it. On top of that, he starts chewing on its skin, making the herd of the undead charging towards him at full speed. Looking at it, Lloyd is excited to see that his plan is working to get their attention, so he starts swiftly running to lure them somewhere, while commending the baby mastodon for its acting. It is then explained when Bairn is raising the baby mastodons, Lloyd witnesses the adults visiting every day to check on the well-being of their babies. That is enough time for Podong to catch up, as Lloyd tells him to go past the valley, then hide in the forest. Watching from the top of the valley, the soldiers feel grateful yet useless at the same time to see their lord for saving their asses. While Goming is chilling and singing on top of the tree branch when his master is risking his life to save all of his subjects' life. But out of nowhere, Javier grabs him to see whether he still has the red sunflower seeds and to ask about how long it takes him to fly 10 kilometers to the north. At the bottom of the valley, Podong is running for his dear life as the herd slowly catches up to them after being fueled with all the anger. Knowing that, Lloyd uses discharge to try slowing them down. The magic bullet lands on one of the mastodons, exploding it. As it dies, it caused a chain reaction, making one after another to explode as well. But there are still too many of them, as the herd keeps charging forward, while Lloyd is out of ideas on how to deal with them. On top of that, Podong suddenly stops, only to see that it's the end of the road for them because the valley is somehow collapsed and blocking their route. But Lloyd doesn't simply give up. He uses his scan ability, but finding it that Podong would probably fail to climb those blockages. Panics start to creep in as the herd keeps getting closer behind him, so he calms himself down, thinking of all of his skill, all of his experience, and combines them to estimate his limit. Having an idea in mind, Lloyd gets down, worrying Podong with what he is about to do. He was originally afraid of going into a near-death state after using discharge too much. Mustering all of his mana into the tip of his shovel, he chooses to do it anyway after determining that's the key to breakthrough. Not a third nor a half of it. Instead, Lloyd put all of his mana that he can muster, performing a mountain discharge. 3 quick succession mana blasts shoot up towards the sky, stopping the herd of mastodons in their track with the sheer amount of mana being used. His mana is depleted, strength leaving his body as he drops his shovel and drops on his knee as the herd arrives mere yards away from seemingly his lifeless body. Right at that moment, his supercharged skill activates and sucks all of the mana around him without distinction, crumbling the mastodons back into their corpse after the mana that supports their undead magic is absorbed. On the other hand, Podong's mana also gets absorbed, as well as mana on the nature nearby. Putting his hand up, Lloyd changed the target direction for his extremely OP mana absorption toward the front where the herd is coming. This brings him back to how he absorbed the mana of the queen and everything around him, thinking of it as his mana heart skill has leveled up. And one night he is asking Javier to become his bait. Lloyd obnoxiously orders Javier to do it, with the thought of using Javier for his mana lunchbox and as an offering for its level up. So he uses discharge repeatedly to deplete his mana to activate supercharged skill. It starts as how it's performed before and destroys the surrounding. Being excited to eat his mana lunchbox, Lloyd tries to concentrate on getting only Javier's mana. Somehow it works, and the thoughts of sucking Javier dry excites Lloyd even more as he laughs hysterically, only for him to receive a notification saying Javier's type of mana is not something Lloyd's lowly body can handle, making him spit so much blood, worse than the empty tank his mana heart has. Looking at his Lord bathes in a pool of his own blood, Javier happily asks for Lloyd's well-being. Even though he failed back then, Lloyd still thinks it's possible to decide on the target and direction. All the mana on the undead herds belong to him now, as bone pieces fly through every time the mastodon passes Lloyd's hand. A series of notifications appear, from telling him that has exceeded the amount of mana that he can absorb, to his mana heart is being expanded forcefully, on top of the large amount of experience he receives. But Lloyd's vessel is being destroyed from inside, though, knowing the mana he is absorbing is rotten mana of undead. Lloyd needs to rotate his mana star even more in order to circulate the rotten energy. It's a repeating vicious cycle where Lloyd keeps absorbing an undead mana that keeps breaking his heart, so he needs to keep refining that mana while using that mana to heal his mana heart. He sucks all of the herd's mana in the valley, leaving a purplish mana trail as he keeps leveling his mana heart skill up. When all is said and done, Lloyd is able to stand his ground again, as well as his sword ability ranked up to expert intermediate, which increases his physical ability. Not only that, with his bloodshot eyes he stands tall against the remaining mastodons that are still charging towards him, to command them to kneel right after he get another mana heart skill option that allows him to dominate the undead. It caused every undead that has lesser mana than Lloyd is within his control now. And looking at how relieved Podong is, he throws a blue sunflower seed and taking him back home riding the herd of the undead mastodons. Though, the information on the skill doesn't stop there because the undead domination skill only activates when Lloyd facing them. As sweats rain down on his face he tries to look back, seeing how at the back of the herd, one by one, a bunch of bloodthirsty mastodons start eyeing Lloyd again. All of this because of how many mastodons are making the duration for the domination is only for 40 seconds. Panic sets in, as Lloyd starts frantically running away along with Podong, and the baby mastodon from the rest of the herd that get back their mind to it. Every second that goes by, the grimmer it looks for Lloyd. With nothing to defend himself as well as nothing to decimate them entirely, failing to see any way out, Lloyd screams out his frustration at the top of his lungs. Right after, he crouches and grabs the two adorable companions into his arms as the swarm of the herd arrives and ready to devour them. But suddenly, a web shoots down latching onto Lloyd, saving their bone from being crushed to pieces. Looking up, it's Javier riding Goming looking cool as fuck for saving his lord. Though, instead of assuring Lloyd's safety, he summons his aura sword as well as telling Goming to ride along the valley. The bird looks so done with it, but after hearing Podong's words, he immediately zips through. Getting close to a narrow section of the valley, he dives closer to one of the walls as Javier is ready with his sword. Getting right to it, Javier runs his sword along the valley's wall trying to bury the herd of mastodons that are still charging after them. While all this time, Lloyd is still dangling in the air, getting dragged around like a sack of meat hanging onto his dear life along with the adorable baby mastodons in his arms. The cliff is crumbling and a bunch of massive boulders start to rain onto the herd. Javier's idea proved to be a good one. When the boulder hits the herd, the impact causes them to explode. One after another, it sets off a chain reaction for each and every undead mastodon to explode, leaving a trail of massive explosions along the valley. When the dust settles, they land on a safe ground along the cliff. Goming still looks so done with them, as each one of them is trying to catch their breath. Lloyd thanks his knight for saving him, but Javier is mad by the fact that his lord is still able to smile even after all of that. After leaving Javier to cut Rabars and assure him how safe the endeavor would be, only to come across a massive herd of a meat grinder on the project. Javier is mad over the fact that he sees how Lloyd evacuates all of the workers including the white cavalry while riding Goming and sets himself as bait for the herd, only to fail in doing so, which makes Lloyd ask what is the point of this conversation. Javier screams, telling his lord to be more self-aware of what might happen to the county if Lloyd is gone. The apartment, the sewers and all of the immigrants along with the villagers will suffer. Javier reminds his lord that numerous lives are on his shoulder now, begging him to take care of himself a lot more. Even though Lloyd understands the meaning of his knight's words, he argues whether it's okay for a few others to die as long as it's not him. They start arguing. Javier assumes that it's possible to retreat with everyone as long as they do a strategic retreat. But it's not enough for Lloyd. As an engineer, he always tries to prepare for the worst while always hoping for the best. He has done all of that because he tried to do what he can. As the most important person in the county, he did it for what's his. The county along with all of the people in it is his. He emphasizes the fact that if not him, who will protect all of it? Javier asks whether Lloyd will really not stop putting himself in dangerous situations in the future. And of course that Lloyd will, and he will always make sure that he will be paid the most for the risk he is taking. Finally, Javier gives up, letting Lloyd to do as he pleases as long as he is by his lord's side. Right at that moment, Javier's approval rating of Lloyd's is increasing. Beneath the knight's heart, he is resolved to die instead of his lord to fall into danger of dying. Obviously Lloyd knows that, and he starts to taste his pretty-faced knight. Though, on the other hand, Lloyd starts to think of who might be behind this catastrophe, because as far as he knows, Isfahan doesn't have a necromancer of that caliber. Thinking deeper on it, Lloyd suspects that something mentioned about black magic would only be Naran's barrier, so he asks Javier to halt the ongoing work and search for clues. Lloyd is mad, swearing to make anyone that causes this pay handsomely for the damage they had caused to his assets. A few moments later, Lloyd gave Javier orders for all his workers to return to the site and dig some more. Javier is convinced they won't find anything even if they dig deeper, but Lloyd knows that magic this big needs a medium, and it should be near. Suddenly, one of his workers rushes to him with a horse and tells him that Count Cremo is looking for him. Along with Javier, Lloyd goes back to the castle where Count Cremo is proposing a political marriage. Count Cremo tells Lloyd that he used to doubt that he would be a suitable son-in-law. Then, he suddenly became famous for his work, and many noble families wanted to have an alliance with Frontera, which is why he proposed. Lloyd tries to argue that he hasn't received any marriage proposals. At that moment, his father pulls out dozens of proposal letters from the Royal House of Lords, and Lloyd cringes, seeing the pile of letters in front of him. However, Count Cremo sees it as an opportunity to look better because he came right to Frontera to propose rather than send a letter. He offers to hold the marriage at the Frontera residence, but Lloyd bows to him and apologizes because he couldn't accept the proposal. Count Cremo argues that Lloyd is of the age of marriage, and people will think there's something wrong with him if he's not married yet. Javier wants to laugh because it's so true, and Lloyd is simultaneously annoyed. Count Cremo continues to accuse him of thinking so lowly of his family, but Lloyd says that he should look at his daughter Christine's reaction first. She's trembling, and her voice stutters when she tells Lloyd that she's willing to give herself up for the well-being of her family. Seeing her trying to hold back her tears, Lloyd thinks that her reaction is similar to that of a woman who's going to be the bride of a devil. While Javier is literally using all of his power to hold back his laugh because this situation is too hilarious and he knows she doesn't want to get married to his extremely ugly lord. Arcos jumps in and tells Count Cremo that considering the hearts of those involved in this marriage is essential. As he reaches for his wife's hand, he tells him that honoring their wishes will be good for their happiness because they're the ones who have to spend their lives together. Count Cremo considers Arcos' words carefully before reaching for Christine's shoulder, making her wonder what he's going to say next. He apologizes for nearly sacrificing her happiness for the sake of their family, and Christine is moved by his sincerity. They hug each other, and Count Cremo learns that he needs to be more compassionate. He declares that he'll live in love, and Lloyd's parents support him from behind. After Count Cremo and Christine leave, Lloyd sits on the couch and wonders if not marrying him can be blessing. When he turns around, he sees Javier kneeling in the corner and trying his best to hold back his laughter. After a while, Lloyd and his parents agree to reject all marriage proposals, and that news spreads all the way to the Queen. Alicia thinks that even if they accept one of those proposals, the ladies will refuse it. All her subjects listen when she compares Lloyd to a greedy potato, and no one will be happy if they marry him. She laughs at her own thoughts and orders her advisor to boil some potatoes for dinner. However, she still needs to keep tabs on them because whoever Frontera allies themselves with, they will become the strongest family in the area. Queen Alicia then asks if they heard any news from Isfahan, and her advisor informs her that Isfahan refuses to take responsibility for the monster domino and accuses Magentano of trying to blame it on them. She decides to send some delegation to Isfahan, and she thinks hard about who should go there. She then smiles while thinking how fun it'll be if Lloyd goes as one of the delegations. Bayern returns a goat's head to the dining table at the Frontera estate and tells Lloyd that it was found around the northern end of the accident scene. At the same time, Arcos is disgusted by the sight of it. Lloyd is also appalled by the sight of the goat's head. He is adamant in his conviction that there is a link between the two events. Lloyd takes note of the embroidered sign on its head and immediately recognizes it. It was the emblem that Dark Queen Alicia chose to represent her new dominion. Lloyd's thoughts turn to the intricate connection between the wall arcs of Naran and the Dark Queen as he consumes his lunch. He realizes that despite this connection, he can affect the situation's outcome due to his presence. The Queen never strays to the dark side, and the occurrence that caused Naran's wall to come down was avoided. During this event, the people who had escaped the monster domino were meant to go to Naran. But now he realizes that someone is trying to do something that's not happening in the book, and his biggest suspect is Canavero. He's the dark warlock who built Naran's wall and made countless people die in the book. Lloyd tells Bayern to proceed with their project. He needs to go somewhere, making both his parents worried because he rarely rests. He tells them he must go to Naran to find the evidence to support his suspicions. The next day, 6.2 miles north of Frontera country, the center of the sewer system is already finished. Lloyd orders Podong to open the hatch, and he opens it seamlessly. He then steps aside and lets Solidas do his job. Solidas uses his power to lift the waste from the water and then shifts to his dragon form, roaring to the sky as he did. Lloyd is satisfied with what he sees when Solidas breathes fire right onto the waste below. His fire manages to burn them all, and Lloyd tells Solidas that he's to be known as the Dragon of Feckle Destruction. But Solitas doesn't like the name and says Lloyd is terrible at naming things. Lloyd could only argue that he came from a science major, not literature. Then a notification appears and states that Lloyd has established the concept of public health, making Frontera immune to epidemics and foreign diseases. Lloyd smiles happily because that means he managed to once again avoid another bad future for himself and Frontera. As Lloyd and Javier walk back to the estate, Javier asks when Lloyd will go to Naran, and Lloyd answers that he wants to go there as soon as possible. But if he goes there without proof that they're harboring a villain, the Count will have no reason to believe him. Then Javier notices a lot of carriages in front of the estate and tells Lloyd to see it as well. Lloyd has a bad feeling about it, and true to that, all the families whose proposals had been rejected send their daughters to Frontera in hopes that if Lloyd sees them directly, he'll change his mind. When Lloyd asks Arcos about it, he says he can't send them back upon arrival, so he sets up accommodations, and he goes as far as making them a ticket so they can take turns meeting Lloyd. Arcos is definitely excited about it because a rumor has been going around that Lloyd couldn't have a child, but he tries to cover it up. However, Lloyd sees right through him. At last, he sits in a room where the ladies will meet him, but he's more concerned about the heads of their families waiting to get a chance at an alliance with Frontera. The first lady is announced, and she's surprised at what she sees. Apparently, she's mistaking Javier as Lloyd, and when Lloyd tells her that he's the Count's son, her face turns grim by the fact of how ugly Lloyd turned out to be. Lloyd immediately tells her to have a safe journey back home. When the next lady shows up, the same thing happens, and Lloyd tells her to go back home safely as well. After the door is closed, Javier complains that this isn't as funny as when Count Cremo and Christine visited. Lloyd ignores Javier because they'll end up in a debate if they keep arguing, and he tells the servant to bring the third lady. As she enters, Lloyd is visibly surprised to see her. She looks familiar, and Lloyd is sure he has seen her in an illustration from Ventura of Blood and Iron. Then she bows to him and introduces herself as Siluria Naran. Lloyd is surprised to hear her name because she's supposed to be the main heroine and Javier's love interest. Still, in the book, she sacrifices herself to protect the people of Naran. People used to be mad because the writer had to kill everyone Javier cared about. She then tells him that she came because of her father's request and compliments him for his looks. Lloyd once again tells her that she's mistaking Javier for Lloyd, confusing Siluria because she's been talking to him from the start, not Javier. Turns out she recognizes who Javier is. Both Lloyd and Javier are surprised that she knows that. After a while, she sits across from Lloyd and feels sorry for him because he has to deal with marriage when he has so much work to be done. She also compliments his works across Frontera and understands that marriage is the last thing he wants right now. As she is about to leave, Lloyd stops her and asks if Naran has had a sudden increase in the population. Siluria sits back down, surprised that Lloyd would know that. She explains that Naran has received 400 refugees from the monster Domino attacking their village, and she believes they were led to Naran from far away. Lloyd's face immediately turns grim as he silently curses at what's happening. Naran's wall is a magic spell that absorbs the life energy of those within its walls. Lloyd had thought that all the refugees went to Frontera, but apparently some ended up in Naran. He worries that if Cabanero's plan goes according to the book, then countless people in Naran will be dead, and the Hell's Knight will be summoned. Even if Javier is currently the best swordsman in Frontera, no one can beat the Hell's Knight. He's afraid that the destruction of the kingdom is inevitable. The next day, Lloyd is ready to head out to Naran. But when he turns back, he sees Javier with a basket full of letters. Turns out, they are love letters from the ladies that came to the estate yesterday. Javier wonders if Lloyd has never received a love letter before, and when Lloyd says that he never has, he goes silent for a while. Then he puts the basket down, takes one letter, and out of pity he gives it to Lloyd. They end up staring at each other before Lloyd turns to mock Javier for giving a letter addressed to him and teases him to hurry because Siluria is waiting. Javier grits his teeth, clearly upset that Lloyd knows Javier has a crush on her. Lloyd will keep bickering about it and Javier knows that, and the only girl that he ever set eyes on has no prejudice against Lloyd. The upper hand of having a pretty face for this knight disappears just like that. On the way, Siluria asks what a slope stabilization and protection method is, a trick he uses to go to Naran without raising any suspicion. Lloyd explains that it is a method to stabilize a slope, and he needs to see the area in person to determine which method works best. She wonders how Lloyd knows what happened to Naran, and he just tells her that it's an assumption he made based on what he knows that Naran was built on top of a slope that slowly crumbles. This makes Siluria glad because even when she can't marry Lloyd, she knows her father will be pleased that he can worry less about this problem that has been going on for generations. Lloyd smiles, knowing that with this, he could get close to Canavero and make some money from a construction project. Not long after, they arrive at Naran, and the first thing Siluria points out to Lloyd is that Canavero is a generous man and he's also the chief of the merchant caravan. Canavero is currently giving food to the refugees. However, Lloyd's expression darkens because of the symbol that Canavero wears on his sleeve. Lloyd grins after seeing the man smile. He's nothing more than a two-faced hypocrite, and Lloyd intends to destroy him. When Lloyd and Javier arrive at the palace, they are welcomed by Siluria's father. Still, like the others, he mistakes Javier for Lloyd. Siluria sighs and tells her father that he's the honorable knight and Lloyd is the man beside him. Her father is surprised because Lloyd doesn't look like a noble, and Lloyd doesn't say anything after hearing the insult. Instead, Siluria scolds her father for judging people only by their looks. She continues to say that despite his looks, Lloyd is a wise and talented man. Javier is shocked hearing her defend Lloyd, and when he turns, Lloyd keeps his stoic face. Siluria adds that Lloyd didn't come to Naran for the marriage but came to help them stabilize the slope. So the Count expresses his relief because he doesn't want to have an ugly son-in-law. When Javier sees how Lloyd is so ready to cry, happy face fall onto him for finally feeling the win again. Because working with Lloyd provided no other source of enjoyment for Javier, he can't help but crack a grin whenever he hears someone criticizing him for his appearance. In the midst of Siluria's conversation with her father about how they may best assist Lloyd, Javier loses control of himself. He begins to snicker beside Lloyd, which annoyed him even further. Count Naran turns to ask Lloyd some questions about his project. He intended to continue their conversation, but instead, he witnesses Lloyd trying to bury his knight where he totally gives up and holding his laughter. When the night comes, Lloyd, along with Javier in his room, discusses the symbol on Canavero's sleeve. Lloyd tells Javier to keep an eye on Canavero until he gets more solid evidence so they can round up everyone involved without much trouble. Javier happily agrees, making Lloyd wonder why he's so happy when they talk about something serious. Javier just nonchalantly replies that he couldn't stop thinking about Lloyd's lack of appearance. Hearing it, Lloyd gets angry and tries to punch him. But Javier is too skillful and dodges every punch. The next day, in the market, a merchant yells so loudly about his discounted clothes that it catches Lloyd's attention. But after a closer look, Lloyd realizes he's selling shirts with the symbol to everyone. His investigation will be more difficult because that symbol couldn't be used to determine who's involved with Canavero's plan. Then Javier approaches him to inform that he sees nothing suspicious about Canavero because he's been helping refugees. But Javier confides in Lloyd, expressing his suspicion regarding Canavero and the powerful magical lock guarding his secrets. Cautious to act rashly as well, Lloyd opts to delay any actions that may compromise their mission, as the two continue to ponder the mysterious spell affecting the city. Javier tells Lloyd that the symbol is the symbol of the wandering minstrel. Lloyd envisions what plan will work best that's going to save everyone, with the potential of training Javier into a grandmaster capable of breaking the barrier and defeating a Hell Knight. However, he knows it's not an overnight transformation. The fact that he has little time and the risk of getting cornered tempers his optimism. Resolute, Javier promises to conduct research to uncover Canavero's secrets, urging Lloyd to place trust in him. Lloyd becomes more eager to expedite the anchor system's construction because burying these anchors deep into the ground is the best way to stabilize the land. But the technology to build the anchors he wants doesn't exist in this world, so he dispatches a messenger pigeon to Master Corgidus. While he is on his way to inspect the construction site, he hears whispers about an alluring woman working at the distribution center. These stories arouse his curiosity. Lloyd has a sinking feeling that something is off and is determined to look into it more. As he proceeded, he noticed a significant number of people waiting in line to see her. As Lloyd walks deeper into the crowd, he discovers an unexpected discovery. Javier is wearing a woman's clothes, and Lloyd is too stunned to speak. When they finally look at each other, Lloyd makes fun of Javier using sign language. Then he finds out that Javier is disguising himself to work there. Lloyd will believe him even though he doubts that Javier's plan will work. After that, Lloyd leaves, but not before first telling Javier that he's being watched, making Javier diligently keep his guard up. Not long after, he hears Canavero engage in a cryptic conversation, confirming Javier's suspicions. Meanwhile, Lloyd arrives at the site where he had to plant the anchors. He uses his survey skill and unexpectedly finds a skull beneath the ground. He thinks of it for a while, then decides to search the whole area and is surprised to find even more skulls. From there, he decides to start digging them out. Meanwhile, Canavero, along with his cult members, is holding a toast in a dimly lit underground chamber because everything will go as planned. At the same time, Lloyd manages to dig out the skull, where he discovers a sinister trace of black magic in it. Realizing that he may be able to disrupt the cult's plan, Lloyd uses his skills to purify the mana from the skulls. As he picked up the skull, a crystal fell out of it. He uses his inspection skills on it and is shocked as its price is higher than Bayern's annual fee and runs to collect the other crystals. He got excited and passionately dug into the ground and collected all the crystals before packing them in his bag, heavier than expected. As he leaves the place, he turns back and tries to talk with the skull and try to identify how he died. In an unexpected display of gratitude, Lloyd communicates with the skulls. He promises them a peaceful resting place after collecting all of them, making one of the skulls shed a tear. As night falls, Javier makes an effort to explain his situation to Lloyd. It's the only way for him to disguise himself. However, Lloyd cuts him off then teases him instead, saying that it's okay because everyone has their own tastes and preferences, so there's no need to explain it further. Javier makes an effort to convey to Lloyd that this was not the case, but Lloyd assures Javier that everything worked out just great. Because Javier is so reticent, Lloyd decides to inquire about how he came to learn of his new choice. Lloyd continued to make fun of him even though Javier became angry over the situation and yelled at him. Anyway, Javier informs him that there is an additional door that heads underground located beneath the mansion. Lloyd then begins to mock him about his newly discovered inclination again, which only enraged this pretty-faced knight. At the mansion, Canavero is shocked to hear the news that all the skull has disappeared. Everybody is starting to think that their plans are in ruins now. Canavero stops their worry, conveying that he has a plan. A disgusting grin appears on his face as he tells them that the Hell Knight will arrive here as planned anyway. On the following day, Javier once again disguised himself by wearing women's clothes and knocked over a bucket of water. Because a few of the men were gaping at her body, the proprietor requested that she come inside and dry off. The door to Mr. Canavero's mansion is opened, and wearing women's clothes Javier enters. Javier has altered his appearance and is now repressing his mana to remain undetected. Javier dashes to the hidden door, evading every single guard on the way. But when he arrived at the door he had been spying, Canavero already there, leaving Javier with no choice but to hide behind a desk. To open the door, Canavero uses a particular magic circle to undo the lock. Javier examines the process of using magic to open it. He concludes that the lock requires a mana combination to be opened. While Javier risks his life in the demon's den, Lloyd is excited to gloat on the crystals and to acquire additional sums of the free money. Once Canavero is done in his dungeon, he exits the hidden room in the same manner in which he entered it. Javier eventually made his way to the door and repeated the earlier magic trick to open it. After entering the room, he begins to walk down the hallway when he comes upon a deformed orc. Javier can avoid the orc strike and counter it with a mana punch. Nevertheless, he is surprised that the punch does not have much of an effect on the orc. Another strike comes from the orc, and this time, it manages to hit Javier. Even though he had successfully blocked the attack, he was compelled to retreat. And not long after that, a significant number of the undead orcs began to appear. As Javier drew his daggers and prepared to do battle with them, he realized that his earlier suspicions about Canavero were correct. As more and more of the orcs come into view, Javier notices a man with a bald head peeking at him. As soon as he spots Javier, he immediately shuts the door behind him. Javier engages in combat with all of the orcs. Using the twin daggers enveloped in his sword master's aura, he swiftly cut a wild muscle head that came his way. One by one, he gracefully makes his way toward the door, becoming a meat grinder, cutting them up to pieces, before ultimately he kicks the door in, knocking the bald man to the ground after being launched into the air. Javier takes a deep breath and walks up to the bald man, at which point he pleads for his life. After breaking his leg, Javier questioned him about what Canavero was up to. The bald guy tells him that he has no idea as he is just a hired mortician, and Canavero orders him to handle the bodies in the medicine room. But he knows Canavero has killed all of them, so he breaks this poor bald old man's other leg. Right after he dashes as fast as possible, going back trying to report to his lord of his finding, only to find Lloyd nowhere to be found in his room. Grabbing his sword, he decided to secure Canavero first and rush to the mortuary to find the culprits on his own. Using his agility, he zips through the county on top of the rooftop, going to Canavero's castle. Going through the window he went in, immediately unsheathed his sword, releasing the majestic sword aura that he possessed, only to end up being confused that no one was there. Reality sets in. Javier notices that Canavero's plan is already starting as clouds of dark magic gather high up in the sky. The ground is rumbling. People start noticing the purple clouds all over the Naran state, and Javier feels a massive pressure as if something is draining his mana. He rushes outside just to see that the barrier has already been deployed, and everybody inside the county is being drained of mana. Javier gets pissed off and thinks of searching for Lloyd. At the Count's mansion, all the men were on the ground due to a lack of mana. Celuria rushed towards them while carrying a strange necklace, which made her immune to the barrier. On the outside of Naran, there's a dark mage who is holding the barrier on one of its nodes. Evil smile appears on his face, feeling all pumped up for finally going through with their plan, sucking all of the people's mana dry to summon the Hell's Knight. Out of nowhere, Lloyd appears to ask what he is doing there, as there are more than 30 people beside him who are casting some spells. The dark mage is obviously surprised but decides to ignore what all he knows and stray away. Though, Lloyd knows what he is doing, so he keeps annoying the mage and keeps demanding answers. Lloyd tells him that he's going to leave as he will not talk with him, but he has some other plan in his mind. Lloyd walks away nonchalantly before turning back, swinging his shovel, going for the mage's face. He hits the mage as hard as he could, trying to annoy him, only to be surprised to see that his shovel crooked. The mage is grinning, as it turns out that being in the barrier node, he is protected by some kind of a spell, although the damages are still going through but without bothering him from his post. Lloyd swings his shovel again, though this time he imbued his mana into the strike. Making some kind of devilish expression, Lloyd scatters panics all over the mage's mind. Being satisfied beating the mage up, he nonchalantly wonders how his amazing shovel doesn't survive that. Though it had been beaten repeatedly, the mage is still able to maintain his node point, mocking Lloyd with his grin, so Lloyd keeps racking his brain. Then he tries to absorb the mana from the necklace the mage is wearing, but he fails due to another type of protection spell. The mage mocks with his grins again, which starts to annoy Lloyd. so he asks him if he's unable to move from his place as it will disturb the barrier or something, which makes the grim smile disappear, confirming Lloyd's suspicion. Another idea comes up right after. Lloyd smirks as he grabs another shovel, knowing precisely what he should do. Inside the barrier, Canavero walks freely through the people who are asking for his help, but he kicks him in the face instead. A moment later, he arrives at the statue of the fallen angel and starts to perform the ritual to summon the Hell Knight, while at the same time, Lloyd is excavating the ground in front of the mage who holds the node. When he finishes, the ground beneath the black mage has been removed, and he is now trying his hardest to balance himself on a small patch of soil that remains. Having such joyful expressions and knowing what will happen after, Lloyd glances at the wizard for a moment. He pushes the mage with a little blow. The mage gets knocked over as a result. As a direct consequence of this, the crystal lost its magical power. It exploded, resulting in the instantaneous death of the mage. Lloyd makes his way to the crystal and examines it in great detail. The fact that the barrier has been broken on one of the nodes proves his hypothesis. Canavero was reciting the incantations to call forth the Hell Knight when he became aware of a disruption in the barrier. Despite this, he continued his ritual, but Solaria quickly cut him off. After being confronted by the princess, he reacts to her inquiry about what he is doing by unleashing a mana blast against her. But, to everyone's surprise, Solaria can block and absorb the attack, and use it to construct a massive mana sphere to counter him. Canavero deploys a magic barrier, trying to block it with all he has. As the magic sphere hits, it contains a massive amount of explosive power. As a consequence of this, he sustains a significant amount of damage. Solaria walks up to him and inquires about what he is trying to do. Canavero chose to disregard her and attempted to finish the incantations instead. After that, he admitted to her that the Hell Knight was on his way to save him. Solaria is taken aback when she notices that the statue of the fallen angel starts to crack. Canavero seizes this chance to sneak an attack, as he draws a dagger in preparation to strike. However, just like a white knight, Javier appears out of nowhere to cut his hand off to save her. Javier's look of resolute intent indicates that he will unleash another blow to finish him off. He performs another aura sword strike, which unfortunately Canavero is able to deflect with his magic barrier. Javier keeps going at it, releasing more powerful attacks with each swing, twisting the space with his sheer power alone and Canavero's hand along with it. But suddenly, a brilliant lightning strike cascades down from the stormy sky, striking the towering statue with an electrifying fury that shatters it into countless fragments. All the debris from the once majestic statue hurtles downward, threatening to rain destruction upon the unsuspecting civilians who have gathered in the square. Panic and chaos grip the crowd as they helplessly stare at the debris. Solaria jumps in front of them during this perilous moment, her royal gown billowing behind her. With unwavering resolve, she raises her hand, conjuring a shimmering barrier of energy that forms a protective shield over the terrified citizens. The debris, now suspended in midair, smashes helplessly against the invisible barrier, unable to penetrate its mystical defense. Meanwhile, Javier is facing Canavero as he announces that he has won and now they all will be dead as the Hell Knight is on his side. The smoke clears out, and within it emerges the terrifying Hell Knight. Suspense builds up in the air. Even Javier is having a hard time feeling he might be inadequate dealing with such an evil being. But to everyone's surprise, the Hell Knight summoning is imperfect as he came out missing his horse and both of his legs. Canavero now knows that the barrier has been completely undone before he can complete the ritual. Even so, with his ridiculous appearance, the Hell Knight asks what Canavero's wishes are. Canavero points his finger at Javier, wishing to the Hell Knight to kill Javier, without missing a beat, swinging his crimson red massive sword. This evil incomplete being rushes towards Javier. Javier blocks the attack, and the immense pressure from the attack proves hard for this knight to handle. Without giving him time to think of anything, the Hell Knight teleports behind Javier to strike another devastating blow. Javier knows that the strike is too fast and he can't block or dodge it. Fortunately, Solaria not only gives him emotional support but also helps him in this pinch he is in. She conjures a wind dagger, strikes it towards the Hell Knight, giving Javier the split second he needs to dodge the sword strike. The Hell Knight is furious, so he sets his eyes toward the black-haired lady that dared to disturb his business. He immediately dashes, pointing his strike toward her, enraged by the fact that this lowly evil being sets his eyes on the woman Javier has a crush on. He unleashes all of his mana into his aura sword, radiating a brilliant azure light. Javier used his aura blast to attack the Hell Knight and successfully beheaded him, mere seconds away before the Hell Knight's attack reaches Solaria. The strike blasts the Hell Knight away from where she is, while Javier feels a little glad that he manages to save her. On the other hand, Canavero is so shocked that for the longest time he believed that no one is able to defeat a Hell Knight. Soon, he becomes the target of Javier's sword as he expresses gratitude to Solaria for assisting him, as well as implying that he will take it from there, along with telling her to help the injured people implicated. Talking to Canavero, Javier claims that he will pay after he dares to summon a Hell Knight. Canavero appears to be under a lot of pressure for a moment. until he breaks a malicious grin, which throws Javier off. As Javier turns around, he is overcome with fear when he sees the Hell Knight emerging from the ashes of the corpse. Canavero explains that his mortal attacks will not be sufficient to kill the Hell Knight, adding that such a being is immortal as long as there is mana provided. The Hell Knight rises again, expressing how sorry he is for underestimating Javier's capabilities and admit that he didn't anticipate such a strong opponent. Out of respect, he reveals his name, Geolxius, the first Legion commander of the King of Hell, and from that moment on, he pledged that their fight will be to their death. Paying back the respect, Javier introduces himself as well, known as the Knight of Frontier County, claiming that he will be sending the Hell Knight to where he is supposed to be. In an instant, both of them disappear in lightning speed. Just like two sides of a coin, a noble and devilish knight, both who take pride in their swordsmanship begin to clash. Within a single seconds, the two knights traded hundreds of blows trying to gain an upper hand. With each sword strike they trade, the harder it becomes for Javier to repel the next one. The longer the fight goes, the clearer it becomes to Javier that he is not capable yet to go against a being of a Hell Knight caliber, even with a fraction of the power he is summoned with. Another sword strike comes again, and Javier fails to defend against it, blasting him into the ground. Fortunately, he left unscathed, but Javier starts losing and the Hell's Knight keeps coming at him. Having no other choice, Javier uses his nimble feet to dodge the next attack that comes. The fight turns into a cat and mouse game, where Javier can only dodge the Hell Knight's devastating attack. Trying to make an opening, he throws his dagger imbued with his aura sword, where the Hell Knight obviously sees through him and easily catches it. Javier knows that, and immediately uses the opening. He dashes forward trying to land his aura sword strike. That desperate attack proved to be useless, as his attack failed to land on anything as the Hell Knight is nowhere to be found. Somehow, Javier is able to anticipate where the next attack would come. Not only that, he also manages to disarm the Hell's Knight and goes for an immediate attack at him. But the strike fails to land because the Hell Knight grabs Javier's leg along with releasing a mana that is able to block Javier's flow of mana. There is nothing that Javier can do now. The Hell Knight starts swinging the noble knight into the floor repeatedly, crushing his body with each crash, rendering him unable to make any move to strike back. Completely knocked out on the floor, Geolxius expresses how fun it has been to fight such a noble knight. As he is going to deliver his execution, Geolxius pledges to remember Javier's name before offering to fight again in Hell. Just as the Hell Knight is going for Javier's neck, Lloyd intervenes, making the Hell's Knight purposely missing his strike. Lloyd threatens to send him back to Hell after killing the summoner. He demands Geolxius to get away from Javier or he will kill Canavero. The first commander of Hell is confused looking at Lloyd. He witnesses such a scary face and knows that Lloyd isn't bluffing. Geolxius even believes that Lloyd is a being that is capable of grinding Canavero's head and drinking it. Lloyd begins to count, but the Hell Knight launches an attack, which Lloyd narrowly evades, leading to Canavero losing one arm because he got caught in the crossfire. The Hell Knight reassures Lloyd that Canavero will survive as long as he's still breathing, leaving Lloyd baffled by the failed plan. After recovering a bit, Javier attempts to attack the Hell Knight from behind but is forced to retreat as the Hell Knight turns around and deflects his attack. Exhausted and drained, Javier lies on the ground. Lloyd angrily challenges the Hell Knight to fight him instead and commands Javier to stay low. They both ignore him anyway, as Javier already sets his heart on dying rather than seeing his lord in danger, and Geolxius only cares about the strong. Growing frustrated, Lloyd unleashes a mana blast at the Hell Knight, only to have it effortlessly deflected back at him. The Hell Knight readies another attack on Javier, but Lloyd intervenes by leaping onto the Hell Knight's back, gaining a temporary boost from the Hell Knight's mana. The Hell Knight warns Lloyd of the mana contamination from Hell. Still, Lloyd reassures him that he's purified black mana multiple times. Terrified, the Hell Knight realizes that Lloyd is a formidable enemy and begins to take him seriously. Lloyd tries to restrain the Hell Knight as well as annoy him. Hell Knight has other plans and pierces his own body to get Lloyd away. Fortunately, Lloyd dodges the attack and taunts the frustrated Hell Knight. He is desperate and struggling and trying everything he can to shake him off. As Javier regains his footing, he seizes the opportunity to attack the distracted Hell Knight, landing a decisive blow to his abdomen. Still failing to finish the devilish knight, Javier tries another attack on him. Having no option to evade, he starts to teleport between the realm of Hell and humans. But Javier doesn't stop and keeps barraging him with an aura sword's attack. That frustrates him even more, as it turns out that Lloyd is able to follow him between realms and is still latching onto him. Javier launches another attack, and Lloyd notices that Javier is moving faster than before, but he is yet a match for the Hell Knight's teleportation skill. At the same time, Lloyd is at his limit, purifying the blackish mana from him. Once he reaches his limit, he will be losing this fight along with Javier. Out of nowhere, a screen pops up and tells him to activate the messenger clause, which makes him even more confused. The system tells him that from that point on, the system will be able to give advice personally to the individual, and the system tells him to sing. It's dire. On one side, Javier is having a hard time keeping up with the teleportation, and another where Lloyd keeps holding on, trying to restrict the Hell Knight's movement. Even though it sounds like nonsense, Lloyd starts singing its work and frantically messing up with the Geolxius. He feels like Lloyd is performing some ancient magic with it. giving the Hell Knight a sensation that someone is scratching his brain with an iron nail through the singing. Lloyd keeps performing his hellish singing despite the Hell Knight's best efforts to pull Lloyd away from him and to stop the tune. Lloyd also tries to tell Javier to attack, only to find that his noble knight is unable to stand his singing as well. At this moment he realizes the reason why his parents never allowed him to perform his singing in front of people. During one of his classes in music, he had just finished singing the first line of a song. After hearing it, the instructor picked up the organ and tossed it at him before he could sing the next line. In addition to this, the pastor of the church where he was trying to sing on Christmas hurled holy water at him and informed his parents that their son was possessed by a demon when he attempted to sing. At this point, he is trying to save the world with his dreadful singing. The Hell Knight is overcome with fear and collapses to the ground as he listens to his singing. While this is going on, Javier uses his mana to block his ears from hearing that hellish song as well as gather it into his aura sword. He dashes towards the collapsed Hell Knight with all the power he has left. Aura Blast, a power he achieves after attaining the status of Aura Swordmaster. He stabs Javier in the chest, breaking the floor of the castle into pieces, decimating the form of the summoned first commander of Hell. After the dust settled, Lloyd walked up to his knight trying to crack a joke, but Javier tells him that it's not over yet. He tells his lord to see more carefully at the mana around them. Once Lloyd does what he is told, he notices the thick blackish mana around them still present. The mana gathers in a single point, slowly forming the Hell Knight as Javier tells his lord to stay behind him. But Lloyd doesn't feel the same way. Instead, he smiles, claiming that it's okay and the Hell Knight won't be able to survive in the human world anymore. Javier asks him to stop joking about it, even after witnessing his strike go through the Hell Knight's head like that. So Lloyd offers a bet on it, saying that the poor little devil knight is already dead. If he survives, Lloyd will serve Javier as his subordinate for a year, while if he doesn't, Javier will cosplay as Javier when they are returning. On the other hand, Javier quickly agrees in fear of Lloyd getting closer to the slowly forming Hell Knight. Lloyd lifts his shovel, performing mana blasts as many as his mana can handle aimed at the palace's roof. His blast crashes into the structure, creating a hole that lets in a beam of the sky. Instantly drained of mana, Lloyd falls down on his knee. But he knows what he is doing, as he immediately performs his supercharged skill, trying to absorb all the blackish mana that slowly builds the Hell Knight's body. Javier thinks of him as a fool, because he believes that Lloyd is merely human and won't be able to absorb his immense mana. True to his word, Lloyd vomits blood because there's too much of it being absorbed at once. He doesn't give it up, only seeing one option, which is to see who will last till the end. Determination fuels him as he pushes his body to its limits, yet he knows he is losing this battle, hurting him from inside. But he is not alone, as both the pair of Javier and Celeria tap on his back, willingly offering their own mana to help Lloyd survive the onslaught of dark mana. Seeing Lloyd's dire condition, Celeria decides to use her healing spell, empowering him with a sliver of hope and strength to win. Lloyd is excited receiving their support, and he can see himself winning it against the first commander of Hell. Gradually, Lloyd manages to absorb and purify all the dark mana, his body visibly straining under the immense pressure. With a weary smile, he announces that the exorcism is complete as he collapses to the ground after being exhausted. Filled with concern, Celeria rushes to his side, fearing the worst. But as someone who has seen Lloyd in such states before, Javier reassures her that he will recover with time. As Lloyd passes out on the ground, the system notifies Lloyd how he defeats the core commander of Hell, making the King of Hell himself want to meet with him. At the end of the day, Canavero gets detained in a prison cell and getting transported towards Magentano, because the rest of the judgment will be given by the Queen herself. Lloyd, who is already recovered, having a hard time thinking of a way to progress his project. The barrier caused all the workers to lose their strength and unable to work. He is stressed out, racking his brain trying to see if he can continue the project. He taps out as he remembers that system's notification. Somehow, he has absorbed not only the Hell Knight's mana but also his power, as well as upgrade his undead domination skill further, which allows him to gain a complete control over the undead that is weaker than himself with no further limitation. Lloyd is so excited for the possibility of using the undead. They will be ageless workers that don't need payment and will be so cost efficient for the county development. The system tells him that he has received a new title called Demon-Possessed Singer, but Lloyd knows that's how the system is mocking him. Right after, he wonders where he could find zombies. While looking at himself in the mirror, he finds his eyes purplish glowing like a demon. Out of nowhere, there is a knock on the door. As Lloyd opens the door, finding a vast number of the undead are standing in front of him. Lloyd asks them who they are. Instead of answering, one of them starts to manifest his soul before talking to Lloyd, which extremely disgusts Lloyd, so the undead asks for forgiveness, then using a piece of paper to communicate with him. It tells Lloyd that they were the people who were killed by Canavero and were roaming around when they felt a power that could give them a physical form, and they came here. The undead thank Lloyd for appeasing their vengeful souls, which shocks him. It turns out that after the battle, Lloyd buried all the skulls he found and prayed for their peace. The undead tells Lloyd that they have no memories of a past life and have no goals. If they wander around in the open world, they will get exorcised eventually. All of the undead bow in front and plead to take them in and give them a chance to repay their debt. Lloyd tells them there will be a lot of work and asks them how much money they need. only to find that they don't need any, neither food, and only require a cubic meter coffin. Lloyd is pumped up and announces that from now on, the undead will be known as the Frontier County Skeleton Squad, and he is thrilled as his dream of having free labor workers is finally fulfilled. Javier wakes up due to the chaos and sees the undeads cheering along with Lloyd, but at this point, he does not care as it is too much for him to understand, so he goes back to sleep. The following day, the Frontier Skeleton Squad is working hard. Lloyd takes pleasure in the scene because none of the members receive payment for their efforts, which means more profits for him. When Count Naran sees the undead working for Lloyd, he passes out from shock. Lloyd reveals to the Count that he is a master of summoning and can call forth all creatures by utilizing his shining eye. The Count is taken aback by this information. While the onset of winter is close, yet work on the structure continues without a break. And there, outside in the snow, Javier keeps looking at his hand, remembering how Siluria assisted him back in the fight with the Hell Knight. Out of the blue, she appears. With her green eyes, she greets the Frontier's noble knight with her warm smile. Though, Javier is under the impression that she needs a report on the project. Nevertheless, the princess clarifies that she is coming to meet him. She tells him that she would really appreciate it if he could show her how to make better use of her mana, just like he did. Although he is somewhat reserved, Javier agrees to do as asked. So they sit together as Lloyd takes a peek at the two lovebirds, thinking how sweet it is. That also brings him back to how the original story was supposed to be and Siluria fell in the fight with Canavero. Since then, Javier has become a loner. On top of that, no one wants to be with him since they all thought that he has a cursed mana. If they help him in any way, they are afraid they would end up dying like Siluria or any other that is close to him. But Lloyd changed everything, and Javier is happier than ever to be able to sit down with the love of his life without even knowing, which is making Lloyd proud of himself over the fact. The construction project was finally completed a few days later, but not as promised. The Count pays 10 times the original amount after Lloyd's contribution in apprehending Canavero. In preparation to go back to Frontier Estate, Lloyd thanks the Count as everyone else is praising him for his bravery. Though before he left, the Count asks if Lloyd would be wanting to be his son-in-law and inherit Naran. But Lloyd rejects this offer, adding that he is already the successor of the Frontier Estate and assures him that Naran already has its own great successor, saying that Siluria will become the continent's greatest mage, as well as implying that he will not take her away from Javier. As they leave the state, and for once being nice to his knight, Lloyd offers and will let Javier stay in Naran if he wants to. But Javier doesn't want to, claiming he is Frontier's knight and will always be by his lord's side. Lloyd tries to force his knight to stay, but Javier simply doesn't want to comply and asks to be executed instead. So Lloyd smiles, leaving their affair on hold for now and goes back to Frontera. Knowing that Lloyd is back, Lord Arcos and Marbella frantically run to welcome him. Lloyd immediately tries to explain the situation with all the undeads, but Lord Arcos holds him off. He notices how the noble knight of Frontera came back wearing women's clothes. Because he lost the bet back in the fight with the Hell Knight, now he has to do it. Lord Arcos assumes that Javier must have been holding it all this time. So he comes up to him, hugs him while saying that it must be hard hiding his true self. Javier tries to explain himself, but Lord Arcos, oblivious to the fact, assures him that it's okay and he will cherish this noble knight as who he is, while Lloyd laughs mockingly at him. The two parents then hug Lloyd along with moving all the riches he gained. Though when all is said and done, Lloyd thinks how happy he is for coming back with peace of heart to do nothing and slack around. Yet again, out of nowhere the messenger of the Queen arrives. Without giving Lloyd any time to react, the messenger immediately announces that the Queen orders him to be a part of the special envoy that will depart to Isfahan. She orders Lloyd to depart, like immediately right now. Lloyd is forced to go on a mission against his will after the royal guards abduct him and take him captive. Lloyd is so upset that he is bawling his eyes out inside the royal carriage, and Javier is doing his best to calm him down. The leader of the envoy, Count Ventura, asks why Lloyd is so sad after receiving such an honorable mission from the Queen. Being sly, Lloyd explains that the reason he is unable to stop sobbing is that he is so content with the order. Lloyd begins to cry even more, which irritates Ventura even more. A few days earlier, he asked the Queen why she chose Lloyd to be the envoy because Ventura feels confident handling Isfahan. The Queen explains nothing is related to that, though she adds that from the moment Lloyd receives the order, he will cry and create a huge fuss, adding that after hearing what had happened to Naran, which reported that Lloyd and his knight only gathered information for Naran's knight, she knows well it's bullshit. She is certain that Lloyd and his knight who did it and asks Count Naran to hide that fact. That is why she is confident if Lloyd joins the envoy, he will definitely bring back results, leaving Ventura speechless. She explains how Lloyd bears grudges easily and is a materialistic person who's constantly petty, but instructs Ventura to just leave him be, even if Lloyd is about to die, leaving the noble man, Count Ventura, even more confused. Even after all that, looking at Lloyd as in tears now still makes Ventura question the Queen's judgment. After a few days, Isfahan country is finally in sight. At the royal court, the guard informs the Sultan about their arrival, and he orders them to provide all the hospitality the guests deserve. Turns out the guards from Isfahan have provided poor accommodation for Magentano's envoy, and Ventura's frustration simmers as the guards continue to mistreat them. Lloyd is still crying in a corner, as Ventura eagerly asks to meet the Sultan as quickly as possible, only to be denied, explaining that the Sultan is occupied and they must endure a wait of more than 6 months. Ventura's anger intensifies. He knows that this lengthy delay is merely an excuse to subject them to poor treatment. Then the guard offers him a padishar instead, a token that grants them free access to various amenities in Isfahan, suggesting they find a better place to stay. Ventura cedes, convinced that Isfahan looks down upon them. Refusing to accept the padishar, Ventura remains steadfast in his anger, prompting the guard to insist that receiving such an honor is a significant gesture. With a final gesture of indifference, the guard drops the padishar to the ground and departs. After they leave, Ventura tells the royal messenger that they must send a letter to the royal kingdom to get reinforcements. The royal messenger asks Ventura if he has seen Lloyd anywhere, but Ventura ignores the question, only to realize that they're missing the padishar as well. When the night falls, a poor boy is selling torches in the kingdom, but unable to sell a single one that day. A stranger approaches the poor kid and asks him if he is looking for a place to sleep, and the stranger is none other than Lloyd, claiming that he will help. Before long, they arrive at the front of the most expensive hotel in the capital, and Lloyd tells the kid that it is his hotel. He immediately asks the kid to sign the contract, and then the entire hotel will be his. The boy scaredly asks Lloyd who he is. With an obnoxious and evil smile, Lloyd tells him that he is a man with the blessing of the almighty Samarkand while showing the padishar. After that, Lloyd goes to a very expensive restaurant and dances around with the thing. He announces to the people there should be no hunger that night, asking all of them to invite everyone they know, waving around Samarkand's blessing on them. The following day, he goes to the silk shop, where he requests the owner to give him the finest silk he possesses and purchase everything from him while displaying the padishar as a payment. After that, he travels to the harbor and speaks with the proprietor, requesting that all available ships be brought to him because he intends to acquire all of them. As he completes the purchase of each vessel, he transports them to the estate in Frontiera, along with other items he has acquired. And using Samarkand's riches, he will buy every Isfahan's good, then transport them to Frontiera. Before long, every seller in the city approaches him, requesting that he purchase all the items from them. Like a beacon of light for these people, Lloyd shows the radiating light of the padishar off, hoping its grace will reach everyone. Right at that moment, the soldiers from the royal army comes to arrest him just as he is about to make another purchase. While being tied up, Lloyd and Javier are dragged to the royal palace and they're introduced to the Sultan. Lloyd has earned the ire of the Sultan, who confronts him with the accusation that he is the one who blew out their whole annual budget. Lloyd gives the Sultan an evil smile as he introduces himself and pays his respect to the Sultan. Samarkand knows he is the person who flipped the gigantic domino and spent all that money solely to grab Samarkand's attention. As a result, Samarkand finally meets Lloyd in person. On the other hand, he is pissed as he knows that he has to stop the upcoming war, because when the war breaks out, the first region he will encounter is the Frontiera estate. In the tension-filled standoff, even as he harbors a burning desire to annihilate Frontiera County with the kingdom's full force, his path to victory remains uncertain. Contemplating the dire consequences, he entertains the thought of killing Lloyd right there and then. Yet, deep down, he knows that a single aggressive move could trigger a catastrophic response from Javier, leading to the destruction of the entire capital. Lloyd smiles, aware of the delicate balance, understanding that Samarkand's options are limited, forcing him into a corner. Samarkand's fury simmers beneath the surface as he perceives a palpable threat emanating from Lloyd. Reluctantly, he releases a heavy sigh, issuing the reluctant command for his soldiers to stand down and let Lloyd and Javier go. The Sultan, though begrudgingly, musters the courage to confront his challenger, inquiring whether he took pleasure in wielding the formidable padishar. In response, Lloyd, with a mischievous glint in his eye, strikes an embarrassingly comical pose, offering a prayer to the Sultan that only serves to further ignite the Sultan's fury. Sultan asks him if he is not afraid of Magentano's suspicion, as he eagerly accepts the favor of an enemy country's ruler. Lloyd tells him that he has no problem, as the money the Sultan gave him is incomparable to that of the Queen. The Sultan, annoyed, asks him if he gave him enough money, will he switch sides and betray the Queen, to which Lloyd shamelessly agrees. The Sultan laughs and asks him what compensation he needs for this great deed. Lloyd asks him if he craves war, to which he tells him if necessary, they will have to. Lloyd tells him that they have to first take care of the incited rebellion force full of people agitated by the drought and asks him if he wants to put an end to this. Lloyd offers to put an end to the drought if he wants, but in return, he has to talk with the Magentano's envoys. The Sultan is surprised and asks him to tell the details. When Lloyd is sitting alone with Javier, he's happy that he could successfully trick the Sultan into signing a contract with him. This is the only way to protect Frontiera, since he knows that Isfahan will soon face a rebellion from all the provinces due to prolonged drought. And if the war starts before the rebellion, the damage will be enormous for him. At night, Samarkand is meeting with one of his daughters, Sarajard. He orders her to escort Lloyd as he will soon depart for Kandahar province and also tells her that she has to make him her man by any means necessary. The next day, Isekai'd asks Lloyd to let her join as she was designated as his escort to Kandahar. Lloyd tells her he already had Javier, but she insists on following him. Lloyd remembers that she is the princess of Isfahan but is confused about why she was assigned as his escort. And out of nowhere, she poses like a peacock in mating season, which shocked Lloyd, only seeing death in her eyes. Though, he figures out that her father must have put her up for this. Once again, Lloyd had to deal with the proposal of old men wanting him to be his son-in-law. But Lloyd decides to ignore that for now since he plans to solve the drought problems by building a Persian-style underground waterway. Lloyd knows that in the mountains, 10 kilometers from the city, there is a freshwater source and thinks of using it. They will soon arrive at the city that serves as Kandahar's capital. Lloyd is worn down from his travels and is relieved to finally have some time off. However, the princess does not leave him alone and keeps striking the mating posture while giving him the death stare. Lloyd sits up from his bed and asks what her deal is. She explains that she is only trying to seek his best interests. Remembering the novel, Lloyd is aware that she is the youngest of the 4 princesses who rule the desert. Isekai'd was a brilliant noble, who at an early age had already achieved the level of sword mastery. She has never been seen in public, which is why people are unfamiliar with her. Lloyd is acting as though he does not recognize her by claiming he doesn't even know who she is. And the only thing he needs right now is for her to be out of his way. Lloyd tells her to go to her room, but she adamantly refuses, citing the fact that she is under instructions to be his escort at all hours of the day and night. Lloyd claims she is not required to accompany him because he already has Javier, a highly skilled knight, a sword master of enormous strength, and his official knight, so he does not need her. He starts bragging about Javier's power, which ultimately puts her in an embarrassing position. The rage within Isekai'd grows, and she draws her sword, getting ready to hurt Lloyd, who keeps making weird faces. Both Javier and Isekai'd are shocked by Lloyd's remarks, and Javier shares Isekai'd's disgust. In a fit of wrath, she throws a hard punch directly at Lloyd's face, where it connects with a thud. In a state of panic, Lloyd begs Javier to save him, but Javier seems to be immensely enjoying the show. Lloyd's pleadings go unanswered. After being severely offended, the princess insults Lloyd and storms out of the room. At long last, Lloyd announces that the mission was a complete and resounding success. Lloyd vents his rage toward Javier, whom he holds responsible for the situation because he did not step in. Javier apologizes and admits that he enjoyed laughing while watching Isekai'd beat up Lloyd. The next day, Lloyd and Javier started getting ready for their construction job, but Isekai'd got in the way and stopped them in their tracks. Lloyd asserts that he cannot take her with him since she would cause him to lose valuable time. Isekai'd is adamant that she accompany him, but Lloyd mocks and makes fun of her because she is not a skilled swordsman like Javier. The anger in Isekai'd's eyes is getting worse. She is on the verge of attacking Lloyd. Then Lloyd begins to sing the lullaby he once used to make Javier fall asleep, causing Isekai'd to slump into a deep slumber. As they make their way out of the palace, the villagers look at them unfriendly. Lloyd quickly understands the importance of gaining the participation of the villagers for the construction to progress without hiccups and sets a plan in response. Lloyd calls for the assistance of all of his animal summons. He gives Javier and Padang instructions to build a water well in the city's center. He orders Goming and Hamming to travel with him to the western ice caps. When they arrived at their destination, Hamming drank a significant quantity of water, which caused Goming to have to carry him back. Upon their return to the city, they discover that Padang has finished digging the well, and Hamming starts pouring water into it. The locals stop in astonishment as they stare at the gleaming water source, their faces filled with sheer excitement as they run to it like children to a long-lost treasure. As Lloyd draws nearer to the people gathered there, with his evil and ugly smile he proudly announces to them that he was the one who had the idea of building this well. However, the skeptical villagers start throwing rocks at him, refusing his kindness to buy their favor. Undeterred by their skepticism, Lloyd continues to flaunt his achievements, gracefully sidestepping the stones hurled in his direction by the still doubting crowd. While strolling through the village, Lloyd can't help but notice that many residents remain stubborn, reluctant to take water from the well. He takes it upon himself to refill the well once more, seizing the opportunity to tout his accomplishments and convince the villagers of the well's safety. But the villagers remain wary, and their apprehension manifests once again in a cascade of stones aimed at Lloyd. Under the cover of night, a family that initially rejected the well's water now sits together, happily sharing their first sip. Out of nowhere, Lloyd suddenly appears at their window, eager to promote himself, unintentionally causing the family to tremble in fear. With unwavering determination, Lloyd approaches others who have started using the water, unknowingly unsettling them with his overpowering presence. The following day, it becomes abundantly clear that the entire village has become enamored with Lloyd, cheering for him as if he were their savior. Javier, a perceptive soul among them, watches the spectacle with a mix of disgust and disbelief. Lloyd senses Javier's discomfort, so he attempts to break the ice with a joke, but it falls flat, leaving Lloyd feeling somewhat dejected. Nevertheless, Lloyd realizes that, over time, he has successfully gained the trust and admiration of the people he initially faced with skepticism. With newfound authority, Lloyd calls upon the villagers to line up, seeking willing workers to construct the underground waterway. This project will secure their water supply for generations to come. One curious villager, concerned about meals during the construction period, voices their worry, but Lloyd reassures them with a confident smile, reaching into his pocket to display his padishar, a symbol of his commitment to their well-being. Meanwhile, Samarkand faces financial difficulties in the royal capital as Lloyd's padishar expenditures deplete the royal treasury. After some time has passed, Lloyd and Javier continue their hunt for the underground tunnels that the rebels used to escape oppression by riding Goming. Unfortunately, Lloyd cannot find the tunnels and return to their hotel, thinking that allowing himself to be abducted was the only option to get into the tunnel. At the hotel, Isekai'd and Javier debate about who should watch over Lloyd. Because Isekai'd is apprehensive about the possibility of uprisings occurring around the country, it is risky to allow Lloyd to spend time alone. Lloyd waits impatiently for someone inside the hotel, and soon after, his guests make their way inside. Isekai'd grabs her blade and attempts to enter Lloyd's room, but Javier does not break his lord's commands and prevents her from doing so. There is no way out for Isekai'd other than to confront Javier head-on with force. However, none of her attacks are successful because Javier deftly blocks each and every one of them. Despite Javier's warnings that she shouldn't try to artificially boost her mana because her body can't deal with so much strength, she goes ahead and does it anyway. While Lloyd has been taken captive by rebels and brought to the tunnel, and they are currently questioning him about his plans for their country. Rather than giving a response, Lloyd starts laughing, which leaves everyone else perplexed. They make the decision to reveal his face, but as they do so, a peculiar sensation comes over them, as if they were the ones being held captive in this situation. Lloyd suggests with a cheery attitude that they look into how he came to be held captive by them. He then asks the leader to free him and assures him that he won't make any rash decisions in the future. However, in the end, the leader does comply, although they remain suspicious of Lloyd's motivations. The leader, called Terms, harbors a soft spot for Lloyd as he saves his daughter from dehydration by constructing the well. After they untie Lloyd, a devilish smile appears on his face as if he is going to start a massive fight against them. A moment later, they start cheering on Lloyd's story. The rebels, which earlier filled with so much suspicions, now fully engrossed in the story, even some enjoying popcorn while they are at it. Terms snaps and notices Lloyd's distraction tactic. He stands up to confront him, inciting other rebels to insist that he sit down and listen to the story. In the end, he sits back down as Lloyd continues with his story. He tells them when the locust starts attacking Frontera and making weird faces that terrify the rebels. Somehow, they're completely hooked by his story. The next day, Lloyd and Terms set out together riding Goming, but Terms is puzzled about their destination. Lloyd reveals that they are going to meet the Queen. He explains that he will ensure Terms' safety from the Sultan and provide shelter for his people in exchange for access to their secret tunnels. Back in the royal capital, the malevolent wizard Canavero is interrogated by the Queen. Canavero claims that someone named Targa is behind everything. The questioning is halted as Canavero's health deteriorates due to the truth spells cast on him. A royal messenger informs the Queen that Lloyd is waiting for her, surprising her since he was supposed to be in Isfahan. At the royal court, Lloyd and Terms stand before the Queen. The Queen accepts Lloyd's proposal, agreeing to provide asylum for the rebels and their families. Lloyd expresses gratitude, but Terms remains bewildered by how easily Lloyd convinced the Queen. The Queen informs Lloyd that she is pretty satisfied with his obedience to orders, adopting a sinister tone. She reveals that she intends to push those capable to their limits, ensuring that they work tirelessly for the betterment of the people. Lloyd is stressed by this revelation. Then she says that she will need him to interrogate Canavero, and Lloyd unwillingly agrees. It shows on his face, but when Alicia calls him out, Lloyd explains that he is tired from a long trip. Then Alicia questions Lloyd about whether he is a selfish and cheap person, catching him off guard. Approaching Lloyd, she stares at him, and Lloyd realizes that his lays-filled life is about to face its greatest challenge. Meanwhile, in Isfahan, the furniture in front of Lloyd's room is destroyed as a result of Javier and Isekai'd's relentless duel. Their bodies bear the weight of exhaustion. Isekai'd, who had momentarily lost her focus, suddenly regained her senses. With renewed vigor, she launches herself back into the fray, but Javier skillfully parries her every move, his reflexes honed to perfection. In a breathtaking twist, Isekai'd's eyes blaze with determination as she summons forth an aura sword, a shimmering blade of pure energy. With a primal roar, Isekai'd initiates a fierce assault, her aura sword cutting through the air with a haunting, melodic hum. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Javier responds in kind, conjuring his own aura sword to counter her relentless barrage. The battlefield becomes a whirlwind of flashing energy as Isekai'd continues her relentless strikes. Javier, once confident, now takes her deadly seriously, acutely aware of the subtle instability in her aura sword. Every clash between their weapons sends sparks cascading into the air. However, who had been absent for the whole day, Lloyd suddenly opens the door and hitting Javier on his side. Javier's instincts barely save him as he narrowly evades Isekai'd's potentially fatal strike. The immense pressure exerted by the aura sword leaves Lloyd stripped naked. Confusion washes over him for a fleeting moment, but soon he comprehends the gravity of the situation. Isekai'd, her attention now divided between the two men before her, begins to question Lloyd. Her voice laced with suspicion and curiosity, but Lloyd, pressed for time and bearing secrets of his own, remains unwilling to divulge any answers. He opts for a different approach and starts singing the lullaby once again. As Lloyd sings the lullaby, Isekai'd tries to resist, but she falls helplessly into the ground, falling asleep. Lloyd is all set for the construction and asks Javier if he is ready, but as he turns around, Javier is all tucked in and falls asleep as well. And so, the beginning of a new project unfolds. Step 1 is to go around the labyrinth-like underground tunnel and measure it. Then, as the measurements are meticulously recorded, they confirm the locations that need to be opened or blocked for the direct waterway. During the day, they block off paths other than the waterway route, and during the night, Javier uses mana blasts to create the tracks. For the last step, Lloyd has invited the ghost skeleton core of the Frontier Kingdom, as they will be the primary key to completing the construction. Lloyd takes them to the construction site and explains to them that there is a large amount of water right on the other side of the wall. As they shovel further, they will be swept away in an instant due to immense water pressure. He tells them how, in ancient times, people risked their lives to create such waterways. Among the laborers, the one who is the oldest will give up his life as he finishes opening up the waterway for the sake of their neighbors and their descendants, who will continue to live. He tells them there is no sacrifice nobler than this and points his finger towards the one and only Thords, as he was chosen by him to do such a noble deed. Thords is devastated by hearing this, but as Lloyd looks at him with that determined look, Thords knows he is more serious than ever about this. Lloyd hands him a pickaxe and starts running away from him, telling him that he will be remembered in history for his great deed. But Thords is too scared for this, so he starts running away with Lloyd. He asks Lloyd if the ghost army will be able to do this. Lloyd swears at him and then accuses him of wanting the dead to experience death again. Thords is truly depressed by this and asks if Javier will do it. But Lloyd declines as Javier has only one pair of clothes with him and can't afford to get them wet. The King of Hell, Helkaros, genuinely enjoys the scene and is excited to see what incredible feat Lloyd will achieve in the future. Back in Kandahar, after a long time of bickering, the leader of the skeleton squad, Turtleneck, takes it upon himself to finish the work. Lloyd is disappointed as he wants Thords to be the one to do it. As Turtleneck uses the pickaxe, the waterway opens, and a massive flow of water with immense pressure is released, reaching the civilization. Everybody in Kandahar celebrates as an endless supply of water gushes forth. One of the villagers, a little girl, comes running with a bowl full of water towards Lloyd and offers it to him. Lloyd thanks her for her kindness and tells her that he will surely enjoy it. But the child has some other doubts. She asks Lloyd why he is walking around without a shirt. Lloyd smirks and tells her that he doesn't want to waste money on buying clothes. After opening the central waterway in Kandahar, they connected the canals to the small villages and hamlets nearby. Nearly the end of Lloyd's project, the system informs Lloyd that he has unlocked a new title, giving him 100% resistance against dehydration in all desert regions. But he is disappointed as he will not need such a perk now that he has completed his job and can just laze around. Then, Terms approaches Lloyd to speak with him. Lloyd asks him whether he is ready for a lengthy trip. Terms shows respect by bending his knee and expressing gratitude to him for rescuing him and his people. Therefore, Terms and all of his fellow soldiers swear undying fealty to the Frontier family to the very end. Lloyd is informed by the system that his favorability has increased. As a result, he has been awarded RP points due to this change. Lloyd makes a strange face, his expression indicating that he is pleased with his RP points. In a short amount of time, Terms and his companions will, under the direction of the skeleton squad, make their way to the Frontier territory. It would appear that everything has been sorted amicably, but soon after, the two of them will receive a call to appear before the royal court in Isfahan. Lloyd gives the Sultan of Samarkand weird answers as if he doesn't understand what the Sultan is saying to him when the Sultan of Samarkand begs Lloyd to join his kingdom. Since Samarkand is aware that Lloyd has recognized Isekai'd as his daughter, he poses the question to Lloyd as to whether or not he will wed her. Lloyd declines the offer, citing the fact that Isekai'd's viewpoint is more significant than his own as the reason. The Sultan knows that Isekai'd has a deep-seated hatred for Lloyd and that she will never want to wed someone like that. The Sultan expresses gratitude to Lloyd for his support during the uprising, and, true to his word, he agrees to receive the Magentano's ambassador as soon as possible. After expressing his gratitude to the Sultan for his generosity, Lloyd exited the courtroom. But Samarkand has other ideas in mind because he has no intention of ever releasing Lloyd, and wants to include him in the kingdom in some capacity. Soon, a round-table conference is arranged by the Sultan. Ventura is nervous, but he won't let Lloyd's effort to arrange this go to waste. The Sultan starts the conversation by apologizing for the damage caused to the Magentano kingdom due to his mistake, offering to pay twice for all the damages. It leads Ventura to have a sick feeling that the Sultan is going to demand something unexpected from him. So the first thing he says is gratitude towards the Sultan and tells him he will deliver his message to the Queen. The Sultan stops him and continues his statement, revealing that in exchange for this, he wants them to give Lloyd Frontier to them. Later that day, Ventura goes to see Lloyd and tells him everything. Ventura is depressed as he relays the news, and it seems as if Lloyd has accepted the offer. Lloyd makes an unpleasant face, causing Ventura to panic and start giving excuses. Lloyd smirks, then cuts him off and tells him that he did a great job by accepting the offer and making another terrific face. At the royal court, the Sultan contemplates new ideas on what he should ask Lloyd to do to develop Isfahan. Still, he is soon interrupted by the royal messenger. The messenger informs him that Lloyd is on a rampage in the desert, killing the sandworms. Out in the outskirts, Lloyd is face to face with a relatively small sandworm. Lloyd hunts it, drawing his shovel and attacking it with all his might. When that's not enough, he asks Podung to attack, and Podung charges forward. But somehow the worm manages to get away. Still not enough, he asks Javier to finish it. He unleashes a series of precise and fierce strikes, creating arcs of shimmering light that dance through the air. The sandworm twitches in agony but clings stubbornly to life. Lloyd's eyes blaze with manic determination. He unleashes his full arsenal, directing every ounce of firepower he possesses at the relentless sandworm. The Sultan spectates the whole scene, and soon Lloyd notices him, making a happy face as he finishes his job. At the royal mansion, the Sultan analyzes the situation. He realizes that sooner or later, the whole country will become a battlefield if he keeps Lloyd by his side. He knows that he will not be able to cancel the contract and finally realizes that all of this was planned and that he was stripped of everything from the beginning. The royal knight informs the Sultan that Lloyd took the padishar and left the palace, but the Sultan expected it to happen. Another guard comes by and tells the Sultan that Isekai'd has run away. This was unexpected, and soon the Sultan collapsed and started to cry as he felt he had lost everything. Meanwhile, in Frontera, Arcos awakens to the peculiar sound of Bayong instead of the usual roosters crowing, but he finds it strangely peaceful. As he steps out of his room, he's greeted by the eager Emily, who rushes towards him with news of a letter from Julian. The excitement in her voice is palpable as they both read that Julian has graduated second in his class, earning him the opportunity to work in the capital. He plans to visit them before his assignment officially begins. A sense of pride washes over Arcos and his wife as they read the news, their hearts filled with happiness. Just as they bask in the joy of Julian's achievements, Bayern appears, his expression a mix of excitement and urgency. He informs Arcos that Lloyd's shipment from Isfahan has arrived, gesturing to the towering stack of boxes in front of the palace. Marbella's eyes sparkle as she notices the beautiful and rare jewelry among the items. She suggests they sell them to other nobles at a high price. This proposition momentarily makes Arcos smile, as it sounds like something Lloyd would say. Despite the unusual turn of events, Arcos is content and decides to take a leisurely stroll with his wife. As they walk, they encounter a few farmers and orcs, a testament to the diverse population of Frontera. Their peaceful journey takes an unexpected turn when they come across Greg and Kuga along with their group of friends. Tensions rise as Kuga intentionally bumps into Greg's shoulder, eliciting a retaliatory shove. Arcos and Marbella worry that things might escalate. But then, to their surprise, Kuga breaks into a sudden dance move, nearly kicking Greg in the face as he strikes a breakdance pose. His eyes challenge Greg, who responds with an elaborate dance move of his own. It dawns on Arcos and Marbella that a dance battle is unfolding before them. Choosing to leave the dancing duo behind, they soon encounter the skeleton squad. Continuing his exploration, Arcos takes his horse to survey the area and spots Salida's burning waste. He also encounters workers worshipping a rather unattractive statue of Lloyd. It all seems bizarre, but Arcos is glad everyone lives peacefully in their own unique way. As the day progresses, an announcement alerts that Lloyd has arrived. Arcos and Marbella eagerly await their son's return. However, when Lloyd descends from the carriage, they are taken aback by his nearly naked appearance, adorned only in a cape and shorts. Lloyd nonchalantly explains that he has plenty of clothes at home, so there's no need to buy new ones. Arcos can't help but marvel at the peculiarity of his son. Still, it doesn't dampen their excitement as they rush forward to embrace him. Meanwhile, in the royal kingdom, Ventura reports everything that transpired in Isfahan, leaving the queen intrigued by the unprecedented turn of events. She questions Ventura about his role in the negotiations, and he hesitantly admits that he took all the credit, a revelation that amuses the queen. The Queen Alicia inquires about the qualities needed to lead a leisurely life. Ventura suggests the importance of influential individuals to manage the throne and handle diplomacy. However, the Queen has a different perspective, emphasizing the need for individuals who can work tirelessly for the kingdom. She then ponders the longevity of the treaty with Isfahan, considering the historical enmity between Magentano and Isfahan. She is determined to find a way to establish a mutually beneficial relationship with the neighboring kingdom. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of Frontera, Isekai'd arrives with a resolute determination to find Lloyd. Arcos, who's peacefully sniping off some plants, is approached by Isekai'd. She introduces herself as the daughter of Samarkand. She explains that she couldn't sleep without Lloyd, leaving Arcos utterly surprised by this unexpected revelation. Somewhere else, Lloyd is finding himself waking up in some kind of deserted area at the edge of a cliff, where suddenly a massive fireball rises and makes out a figure trying to talk to Lloyd. The figure greets him and, to Lloyd's astonishment, he reveals that he knows Lloyd as Kim Suho. Lloyd is taken aback, questioning whether this is just a dream. but the experience feels all too real. The fiery figure introduces himself as Helcaros, the ruler of Hell. As Lloyd nervously converses with him, he maintains his wit and composure. Helcaros commends Lloyd, even though he believes it's just a dream, and remarks that Lloyd is well suited for Hell. As their conversation continues, Helcaros comments on Lloyd's potential and regrets that he wasted it on a small dream. Lloyd expresses his desire for a simple, wealthy life, to which Helcaros scoffs, claiming that Lloyd's face could make devils flinch and his singing is more terrifying than the screams of purgatory. At this point, Lloyd wonders if Helcaros has come to mock him. Suddenly, Helcaros attempts to recruit Lloyd to work in Hell, summoning roots from the ground to ensnare him. Panicking, Lloyd struggles to break free, but the grip tightens, making escape seem impossible. Just as Helcaros seems determined to drag him into the depths of Hell, a message from the system intervenes, prompting Helcaros to release Lloyd. Helcaros reluctantly agrees to give Lloyd another chance and then disappears. Gasping for air and covered in sweat, Lloyd awakens, wondering about Helcaros' mention of interference and playing by the rules. Before he can ponder further, there's a knock at his door and Javier enters. Lloyd dismisses his appearance, claiming that he's sweaty from the hot weather. Javier informs Lloyd that someone is looking for him, and Lloyd smirks, already aware of the visitor's identity. As they make their way to meet Isekai'd, Javier questions whether Lloyd knows who's seeking him. Lloyd confidently asserts that Isekai'd is searching for him because he can put her to sleep with his lullaby, surprising Javier. Upon meeting Isekai'd, she intends to capture Lloyd's lullaby in a crystal ball. Arcos feels a mix of fortune and regret as the negotiation unfolds because he initially thinks Lloyd already found his suitable wife. Isekai'd offers to pay Lloyd for his services, but Lloyd, ever the entrepreneur, places a contract on the table. He proposes that Isekai'd serve Frontier for 5 years in exchange for the lullaby. Javier knows that this contract essentially means to enslave her indefinitely. Isekai'd read the contract thoroughly, and she immediately rejected it. Lloyd proceeds to list all the benefits she would receive, including becoming a swordmaster, while Javier questions whether the training and lullaby are just meant to make her a slave, accusing Lloyd of setting her up for this moment. On the other hand, Isekai'd loses her temper and strikes him across the face, messing it up so bad. Fuming, Isekai'd walks into the forest, cursing Lloyd every step of the way. However, as she reflects on the possibility of becoming a swordmaster and earning her father's recognition, then it dawns on her that she strayed far from the main road, so she focused on getting back to it. After a while, she peeks from behind a tree and spots Julian sitting on a tree bark on the ground, leaving her wondering what brought him to this remote location. And from then on, a new romance is starting to brew.